With Resident Evil back on track, Shinji Mikami returning to the world of survival horror he helped create, and surprise indie hits like Outlast, the current console generation has been a treat for fans of the dark and dreary. With Halloween approaching, we're looking back at the 25 scariest games of this generation, November 2013 to the present. Layers of Fear developer Bloober Team stepped away from its usual psychological horror for Observer, a mindbender set in a cyberpunk dystopia. The result is a well-realized concoction of mind tricks that will have you slowly questioning the reality of the game world. Echo may not be a typical horror game, but its main hook, being hunted by clones of the playable character who use your play style against you, creates a constant sense of unease and moment-to-moment tension as you question every move you make. Coming in at under an hour per playthrough, Anatomy makes the most of each moment, guiding you through a barely visible house of horror. Developer Kitty Horror Show told Slate, a jump scare is when you attack the player, a dread scare is when they have to do something even if they don't want to. And the dread scare is what Kitty Horror Show deploys to great effect in Anatomy. Bloober Team has a knack for distorting reality, and the ever-shifting home of Layers of Fear's mad artist is that distortion at its most effective. While its tricks become more predictable and therefore less scary as you progress, Layers of Fear hits impressive horror heights in its opening hour. When any everyday object could be a murderous shape-shifting blob of black goo, it's hard to ever feel safe in the world of Prey. With its constant threat of mimics, the occasional jump scare, and head-spinning sci-fi story, Prey succeeds as one of the generation's best psychological horrors. Stories Untold is a fresh take on the decades-old text adventure. There's nothing in the realm of monsters or jump scares here. Stories Untold succeeds in its underlying psychological horror thanks to smart writing and puzzle design that will keep you hooked through its 4 connected stories. Soma's atmospheric horror and occasional jump scares work to great effect in its underwater research facility. However, it's the existential horror, a bleak look into the potential future of humanity and AI, that makes it stand out as one of the generation's most frightening and thought-provoking games. Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs trades in the jump scares of its predecessor for a slower, dread-filled journey through the eyes of wealthy industrialist Oswald Mandus. A Machine for Pigs is not the Dark Descent follow-up some expected, but it is nonetheless successful in its more personal story and haunting world. Bloodborne may be billed as one of the generation's best action RPGs, but it's also a masterful take on both survival and gothic horror. Through its storytelling, world design, monster design, and the constant threat of consequential death, Bloodborne is one of the most tense and terrifying experiences you'll find on PS4. Please turn off all the lights and focus only on this screen, a prompt reads before the beginning of Midnight Shadows, one of the 2 bundle games in the Long Night collection. It then asks if you promise not to look away, to which you must select yes, though we doubt it's a promise every player will be able to keep. Like Yomawari, Little Nightmares can't be taken at face value. As the pages of this cartoonish, storybook-style adventure turn, its grotesque character design and gruesome varieties of death are revealed. Until Dawn possesses all the best and worst qualities of a B-grade horror movie: camp, gore, death, interpersonal tension, cheesy dialogue, a corny plot, and overused jump scares. It's not everybody's cup of horror, but it's good fun, and the closest thing you'll find to a playable version of A Cabin in the Woods.
You guys are jerks. You know that?
The disturbing nature of The Last of Us's infected alone, namely the clickers and their awful gravelly groans, would have earned it a spot on our list. However, it's the human element of Naughty Dog's masterpiece that provides the real post-apocalyptic horror. Yes, The Last of Us was a last-gen game, but with its stellar remastered version, we've allowed it on our list.
Sarah. Danny.
More than any other game on this list, it's hard to discuss what makes Doki Doki Literature Club so unnerving without spoiling it. The best horror games keep you on edge after you stop playing, and few games do that as well as Doki Doki. Five Nights at Freddy's built a cult following off its effective jump scares. While simple in its design, its success is perhaps best attributed to its passive approach to gameplay. You're not exploring an abandoned asylum, navigating a haunted house, or even hunting monsters. You're sitting and waiting for the danger to come to you. The forest drops, or rather crashes, you into lush, serene woodlands complete with bright greens and warm sunlight. Then come the cannibals, and the serenity of the forest turns to ear-pumping terror. A thoughtful AI system that prevents enemies from blindly attacking keeps you on your toes and makes the scares that much more effective when they choose to strike. Take The Evil Within, expand its world, further limit its resources, add a more coherent story, and you have an excellent sequel to an already excellent survival horror experience. It's one of the generation's most complete horror packages, and while its scares often surpass those of the first, familiarity dampens fear, and for that reason, we gave the slight edge to its predecessor. Resident Evil creator Shinji Mikami's return to survival horror came in 2014 with The Evil Within, and it didn't disappoint. With roots in Resident Evil, Evil Within thrived off its challenging gameplay, limited resources, inspired world, engaging story, and brilliantly horrific enemy design. The Keeper, Laura, Zen, and Nine, to name a few. Quiet and disconcerting, Detention is a slow-paced 2D horror game that largely takes place in an abandoned school. This isn't in-your-face horror, it's thoughtful, emotional, psychological horror rooted in mid-century Taiwanese history. From character design and movement to environmental art and lighting, Detention subtly nails the atmospheric horror of the genre's best games. Coming into Resident Evil 7, the most prolific horror franchise in gaming had lost its way, gradually shifting toward action-heavy gameplay. Resident Evil 6 was a low point for the mainline series, and after a 5-year hiatus, Capcom returned with the series' scariest, most inventive game since Resident Evil 4. For the first time in series history, Resident Evil 7 used a first-person perspective, a controversial decision for the historically third-person franchise. But despite the change in perspective and initial disconnect from the series' other games, RE7 proved to be the most Resident Evil game in years, paving the way for this year's exceptional Resident Evil 2 remake and an exciting future for the survival horror franchise. As with the Evil Within series, Outlast's second outing expanded on the original in scope and scale while maintaining what made the original's horror so effective. Unmatched, disturbing imagery, grotesque enemy design, a murderous cult rooted in religion, fast jump scares, slow psychological scares, and a coherent story to boot, Outlast 2 has a pinch of well-crafted terror for every type of horror fan. Capcom followed up Resident Evil 7 with a masterful remake of Resident Evil 2. An already stellar survival horror game was made better by exponentially improved visuals, better character models, a more threatening version of Mr. X, a more fluid over-the-shoulder camera angle, and much more. 2019 upgrades aside, Resident Evil 2 remains one of horror's most effective games in terms of building tension. Resources are scarce, sound design is excellent, and the constant threat of Mr. X and his improved stalking ability is surpassed only by that of the next game's antagonist. Alien Isolation nails both the survival and horror aspects of the genre. It isn't the most consistently scary game of the generation, but at its best, its terror is unmatched by that of any other game from the last 6 years. Beyond this generation, few games have achieved the level of tension-filled gameplay that makes up the majority of Alien Isolation, as the Xenomorph's sharp, focused hunting ability leaves little time for respite across its 15 to 20 hour runtime. With Outlast, developer Red Barrels took the found footage movie genre and expertly turned it into a 5-ish hour interactive nightmare. Outlast gives players nothing in terms of defense. It's a game of cat and mouse, where you're the mouse and the cats are hyper-aggressive, disfigured patients at a supposedly abandoned psychiatric hospital. When the lights go out, it stands nearly in a league of its own. PT wasn't a full release, and it's no longer available to download, but the playable teaser was nonetheless the scariest video game released this generation. Set in a single, beautifully rendered looping hallway, turning a corner remained as scary the 15th time as it was on the first. These subtle changes to the environment on each loop preyed on players' expectations of familiarity and added disturbing life to a seemingly restricted play area. Like the other top entries on this list, you're completely vulnerable in PT, unable to manipulate the playable character beyond walking. You can't fight, you can't hide, one wrong step can result in failure, and the price of failure is steep when Lisa is always right behind you. Of course, Silent Hills would never come to fruition. Konami officially canceled the project a day after PT was removed from the PlayStation Store, and with that, the bizarre tale of the generation's most terrifying game came to an end. What do you think is the scariest game of this generation? Let us know in the comments, and for more on everything video games, stay tuned to IGN.
Hey there! Do you have opinions on games, movies, TV, or other weird stuff on the internet? You can take part in our new show, Power Ranking, where you can vote on all your favorite things on the internet. Go to IGN's YouTube community tab to join this discussion. Do it now! Do it! Just go! Vote! Go vote!